She was more than just a Hollywood star. She was a force. When Ava Gardner entered a room, it was as if time paused. Heads turned, voices lowered, and even the brightest lights seemed to dim in her presence. She was magnetic, untouchable yet vulnerable, wild yet refined. The world knew her for her beauty, but those who got close enough saw a storm beneath the surface. And at the center of that storm, a love affair that burned hotter than any spotlight. Ava and Frank. It was the kind of love that made headlines, broke hearts, and shattered the quiet of midnight hotel rooms. To the outside world, Ava Gardner and Frank Sinatra were a match made in Hollywood heaven. Two legends in love, wrapped in glamour. But what no one could see behind the gloss of magazine covers was the chaos, the passion, the pain, the fights that lasted longer than the red carpet smiles, the loneliness Ava carried like a hidden bruise. Born with a southern drawl and eyes that could freeze or melt anyone in seconds, Ava never asked to be a star. But once she appeared on screen, the world decided for her. Still, fame never shielded her from heartbreak. In fact, it seemed to invite it. And when she met Sinatra, charming, volatile, obsessed, she found someone as beautifully broken as herself. Their love was instant, electric, and doomed from the start. Theirs was a love story soaked in drama. He left his wife for her. She gave up her peace for him. There were scandals, screaming matches, reconciliations, and then the final irreversible break. For years, Ava stayed silent about why it ended. The real reasons were too personal, too painful. But in her later years, as age softened her defenses and truth became more important than privacy, she finally opened up. And what she revealed was darker than anyone imagined. This is not just the story of a starlet and a singer. It's the story of a woman who gave her heart to a man who couldn't hold it. It's the story of secrets hidden beneath silk dresses and smoky jazz clubs. And most of all, it's the story of Ava Gardner. Raw, real, and finally ready to tell the truth. Are you ready to hear it? Ava Gardner's journey to stardom didn't begin with a spotlight. It began in Grabtown, North Carolina, a small tobacco farming town where the idea of Hollywood was as distant as the moon. She was the youngest of 7 children, raised in poverty, barefoot more often than not. But there was something different about Ava. Her beauty wasn't polished. It was wild, untamed, the kind that made strangers stop in their tracks. And one day, that beauty changed her life forever. At just 18, a photo of Ava taken by her brother-in-law ended up in the window of a New York photography studio. It caught the eye of a talent scout from MGM, and soon she was flown to Los Angeles for a screen test. She couldn't act, not yet. She could barely speak clearly through her southern accent. But when the camera focused on her face, everyone in the room felt it. That rare magic. MGM signed her immediately. Ava Gardner had arrived. For years, she paid her dues, bit parts, chorus lines, silent glances from across a room. But in 1946, everything changed with The Killers. In that film, she played Kitty Collins, a femme fatale. She was a force. Hollywood took notice. Directors wanted her. Audiences adored her. And from there, her legend only grew. She followed The Killers with a string of unforgettable roles. In Showboat, she sang her way into hearts. In Mogambo, she earned an Oscar nomination, holding her own opposite Clark Gable. Then came The Barefoot Contessa, a film that blurred the lines between her real life and fiction. Playing a poor dancer turned movie goddess, Ava essentially played herself. A woman who became a myth. But behind the glamour, she was still the girl from North Carolina, unsure of her place in a world that often felt too loud, too fake. She worked with the greats: Humphrey Bogart, Gregory Peck, Burt Lancaster. And while her male co-stars racked up headlines and awards, Ava carved her place through instinct, presence, and raw emotion. She refused to be anyone's puppet. Studio heads wanted to mold her, control her, but Ava was always her own creation. That fierce independence made her a legend, and it also made her lonely. It was during this meteoric rise that she met Frank Sinatra. She was already a star. He, at the time, was struggling, his voice faltering, his fame dimming. But their meeting reignited not just his career, but his life. Ava brought out a fire in Sinatra that had nearly gone cold, and in turn, he made her feel seen in a way no camera ever had. Together, they were unstoppable, at least in the beginning. But just as Ava was reaching the height of her stardom, the love she thought would save her was beginning to unravel. The headlines became more about their fights than her films. The roles started to slow, the shadows grew longer, and behind her glowing on-screen image was a woman beginning to feel the weight of it all. Fame, love, betrayal. Ava Gardner had conquered Hollywood, but she was about to enter a chapter no script could prepare her for. One written not in light, but in heartbreak. As the cameras faded and the applause dimmed, Ava Gardner began to retreat from the world that had once adored her. Hollywood, always hungry for the next bright young face, slowly let go of its grip on her. And Ava, never one to chase the spotlight, let it slip away willingly. She packed her life into suitcases and crossed the ocean, leaving behind the glitz of California for the cobblestone streets of Spain. It was the beginning of her quiet exile, a deliberate escape from everything that had broken her. In Madrid, Ava found something rare: peace, even if fleeting. She surrounded herself with friends, flamenco music, and endless bottles of wine. She laughed loudly, danced barefoot, and lived without the need to please anyone. But even across an ocean, the ghosts followed. Letters from Sinatra would arrive, sometimes filled with regret, sometimes rage. Their bond, though severed in marriage, never truly ended. They couldn't live together, and yet they never fully let go. Her health began to decline in the 1980s. A series of strokes left her partially paralyzed and struggling to speak. The once fiery woman, known for her commanding presence, now spent her days inside a modest London flat, her world narrowed to memories and silence. Yet even then, Ava remained proud, refusing pity, rejecting help, clinging to her dignity like armor. She rarely left her home. Friends described her as both defiant and fragile, a lioness aging alone. It was in those final years that Ava began to open up. No longer surrounded by cameras or contracts, she finally found the freedom to speak her truth. In candid interviews and quiet conversations, she peeled back the curtain on her turbulent life. And when it came to Frank, the stories turned dark. She spoke of jealousy so intense it frightened her, of fights that turned violent, of nights when love felt more like war. "He could be cruel," she whispered once, "but God, I loved him anyway." On January 25, 1990, Ava Gardner died in her sleep at the age of 67. There were no flashing cameras, no grand farewells, just silence. The news struck the world softly, like a fading piano note. Hollywood mourned, fans wept, and Sinatra sent flowers but didn't attend the funeral. Whether out of pain, guilt, or pride, no one knows. But those who were close said he was never the same afterward. In the end, Ava left this world as she lived in it, unapologetically, fiercely, and on her own terms. She had known adoration and agony, fame and fury, and though the final years were quiet, her story never stopped echoing. Because Ava Gardner wasn't just a star, she was a woman who lived boldly, loved recklessly, and refused to let the world define her, even as it watched her every move. Though Ava Gardner left this world decades ago, her presence never truly vanished. Her films still flicker on late-night screens, drawing in new audiences who are captivated by that unmistakable mix of elegance and danger. She had a look, eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets, and a walk that carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories. But it wasn't just how she looked that kept people watching. It was how she felt on screen, raw, honest, unpredictable. Ava didn't act, she lived. Today, she is studied in film schools not just for her beauty, but for her instincts. Directors and actors speak of her as a muse, someone who brought authenticity to roles that could have easily been forgotten. Younger generations, unfamiliar with the golden age of Hollywood, discover her through streaming platforms or old interviews, instantly struck by how modern she still feels. She doesn't belong to the past. She exists in a timeless space, untouched by trends or time. Beyond the screen, her legacy thrives in the way she shattered expectations. She didn't play by Hollywood's rules. She didn't marry for publicity or pose for stories she didn't believe in. And she certainly didn't soften herself to be more likable. She was bold when women weren't supposed to be. She drank with the boys, spoke her mind, and followed her heart, even when it led her into chaos. In doing so, she became more than a movie star. She became a symbol of female defiance and independence. Tributes continue to pour in, from museums in North Carolina, where her childhood home is preserved, to exhibitions in Europe celebrating her style and spirit. Books have been written, documentaries made, and in the quiet moments of her old films, you can still feel her soul flicker to life. When she smirks, we remember her mischief. When she cries, we feel her pain. Ava Gardner is not a relic. She's a reminder of passion, of strength, of beauty born from truth. Even artists and musicians cite her as an influence. Lana Del Rey once named Ava as a muse for her melancholic glamour. Modern actresses, from Angelina Jolie to Penelope Cruz, have credited Ava with paving the way for complex, unapologetic women in film. Her legacy lives not just in cinema, but in culture, fashion, and the fight for women to be seen as more than just pretty faces. Ava Gardner wasn't perfect, but she was real. And in that honesty, she became eternal. Ava Gardner once said, "I have only one rule in acting: trust the director and give him heart and soul." And that's exactly what she gave, not just to the directors, but to the world. Every frame she graced carried her fire, her vulnerability, her truth. But beyond the glimmering facade, she was a woman who simply wanted to be loved, understood, and remembered for more than just her beauty. And now, in remembering her, we see the woman behind the myth. As the final curtain falls on Ava's story, we're left with more than memories. We're left with echoes of a voice that laughed too loudly, of a heart that loved too deeply, of a soul that never stopped seeking peace. We remember her not just for who she was in front of the camera, but for the courage it took to be herself behind it. In a world that wanted her to smile and stay quiet, she roared instead, and that roar still lingers. Think back to her days with Sinatra, not just the glamour or the gossip, but the rawness of two flawed people trying, failing, and still clinging to one another. That part of her story wasn't polished. It was painful, and yet she wore it like a scar she refused to hide. Ava never pretended to be perfect. She admitted to her flaws, her regrets, and her mistakes, and in doing so, she became achingly human, relatable, real. So this is where we say goodbye, not with silence, but with gratitude. Thank you, Ava, for the roles, the risks, the rebellion. Thank you for showing us that strength can be found in honesty, that beauty is more than skin deep, and that love, no matter how messy, still matters. You walked through fire and didn't flinch. You gave us yourself fully and unapologetically, and for that, we will never forget you. Now we turn to you. the viewer. What does Ava Gardner mean to you? Which of her films moved you, made you laugh, or left you breathless? Did her story remind you of someone you know? Is someone strong, complex, brave? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let this be more than a tribute. Let it be a conversation, a celebration of a woman who lived on her own terms. Because legends never die. They live on in stories, in memories, and in hearts. And Ava Gardner, fierce, flawed, unforgettable Ava, will live on forever.